welcome back to Dr. Noah's YouTube update, and we're coming up to a big kind of anniversary. About almost a year ago, Fukushima, it's a number of nuclear power plants in Japan after a so-called earthquake and tsunami that came in, destroyed it. Has basically been leaking tons and tons of radioactive material, and we'll talk a little bit about the cover-up and let's not look over there. Let's see who's playing football or who's on American Idol or X Factor. It always needs distractions on some of the serious things. And I do consults with patients that have cancer, and they're just always amazed. Well, I don't know where I got cancer. Well, and then when you go through the 7,000 things that cause cancer, it's pretty easy. In fact, last year cancer surpassed cardiovascular disease as the #1 killer. So more and more people are dying of cancer than ever before, because of all these different things. Well, so in Japan they have radioactive releases coming from these destroyed type of power plants, and that's what we're going to discuss a little bit. So this was March 6th, 2012. Well, now they're just dumping all the crap into the ocean. And even when I was growing up back in the 60s, there was this kind of cute little saying, the solution to pollution is dilution. So they think, because the ocean's so big, you can put these very toxic type of things in the ocean, and somehow that's going to just be diluted to where it doesn't become harmful. Well, it doesn't work, and as we'll talk about, the real science says is that there is no safe amount of radiation. Every little bit increases cancer the more you have. It's a direct linear factor. So this is where the city stops using different types of chemicals, and they're just disposing it into the Tokyo Bay. Here's a nice fun little thing, up in Canada they were testing the fish. 60 to 80% of the fish now is contaminated with radioactivity from the Japanese disaster like that. So that's kind of nice. So you eat that food, you get sick. This is a study that came out that new map shows 120 million Americans are near nuclear fallout risk. This goes a little outside because in this country we have a nuclear power plant, and that's a whole different topic about in terms of energy and independence, which I'm definitely a proponent like that. But unfortunately these nuclear power plants have surpassed their age limit. They were designed to only last 40 years, and they're way beyond that, and a number are leaking. So this isn't just far away in Japan, even though I think with technology and travel like that, we're more of a world community. A lot of people think, oh, Japan, that's thousands of miles away. Well, that's what this states. 120 million people, Americans, live within 20-30 miles of a nuclear power plant, and you're having the same kind of crap that's going on over there, just a little bit slower. This is another the anniversary of Japan suppressed key radiation report, and that's part of the problem, is really trying to find out the real information. This is a special interest group, the nuclear power industry, and nuclear creates nuclear weapons, and so there's all different things from defense to Department of Defense to creating power. So we're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars of money that's invested here, and so they're going to tell you lies just like they told you before. And so this was published in March 5th, 2012, that now they're finding out is at the early stages, where don't worry about it, everything's okay, was just basically a big lie. And so that's where we get into where you really have to take responsibility in terms of trying to have some critical thinking. Don't trust anybody, even myself. Go do the facts, just like I do. But unfortunately, you're not going to find the facts because the infomercials out there is what's going on. Cindy was kind of mentioning, or John was mentioning, people will see a commercial on TV and then they'll run to their doctor and want to have this crap because it's kind of has a little butterfly. It's kind of cute. As we'll talk about, that cute little butterfly kills how many people? 5 people? No. 10 people? No. 50? No. 50,000? No. 500,000 people a year. So that's a good deal. So you can have your little butterfly, and then you wonder why you come down with cancer and have a heart attack, and then we have to spend billions of dollars trying to fix you for crap that they gave you 10, 20 years ago. That was nice. So here's another one. All the western United States and most of the East Coast, Midwest, and Canada covered with airborne particulars at various altitudes from the Fukushima plume studies. I mean, that's what, just like we were talking about before, is that we're in a global type of environment. So what happens in Japan eventually creates a world type of problem here. But most people have now forgotten about it. For about a week, we heard about the the so-called earthquake, and the tsunami came in and destroyed it, and now everybody's just gone to who's going to win American Idol, and some guy that's 700 pounds won't lose weight. I feel for him like that, but these are some subtle type of changes that's affecting everybody in terms of increased cancer, which is a big deal. Here was a kind of an interesting one, is that anything over in Japan is really concerned. So auto industry is a big deal. Just like there's secondhand smoke, well, there's secondhand and tertiary radioactivity. So here's an article that was published back in 2011, and they're worried about cars. Cars that come from Japan are all radioactive. So you buy these new cars, and you're actually creating, more cancer there. But once again, another billion-dollar industry. Hush, hush. Don't say anything. Let's just pretend it'll all go away. Turn your channel to watching, some type of sporting events. Controversy: the United States estimated that the thyroid dosage in California infants, once again, was not released to the public because, once again, they didn't want to scare moms and stuff. Part of the things we'll talk about is radioactive 131, iodine 131, which is a radioactive isotope which causes increased cancer, and we'll talk about some simple things you can do. And there's cesium and strontium and other type of radioactive isotopes that are carcinogenic. They knew about that but didn't release it. So that's the problem, is that people aren't really informed. Now maybe if you're informed and you want to basically exposed to things that cause cancer, maybe that's up, but unfortunately then society has to pay for what's the average cost for cancer? $300,000 to $500,000. So we don't have the money. This is being created right now and costing trillions of dollars in the future. So a common type of thing that I come across is that there's prostitutes out there, doctors that have PhDs and MDs behind them that are working for the industry, and then they have a little dose where they think that a little bit of radioactivity is actually good for you. I mean, the real science, and this is even basic type of 101 physics that you get in college, is that there's no dose of radiation that's healthy for you. 0 is the best. Now we don't live in that environment, and you want to try to minimize that. And you want to basically, as we'll talk about, do some things that actually can reduce that considerably. But that reminds me, I'm old enough to remember when that's the kind of BS that was told about smoking. Yeah, a little bit of smoking is actually good for you. I mean, I actually have, maybe we'll talk about that in videos, I actually have old ads back in the 30s and 40s where true drug doctors who are quacks were actually saying that smoking is actually good for you. It makes your lungs kind of strong. Now, of course, we know, everybody now knows that causes cancer, both primary, secondary, and tertiary. Tertiary is actually after someone smoked and all the secondhand smoke has settled down, just by touching the surface you increase your chances of cancer from the smoke. So you get residuals, and that's what that other study alluded to, is that when you buy a car that's from Japan that's radioactive, that's a tertiary exposure that you're increasing your chances of kind of cancer there. Here's an article from Science Daily. Imperial College of London states that even low doses of radiation not just causes cancer, but heart disease and stroke because it increases inflammation there. Peer-reviewed independent studies show increase of deaths since Fukushima. They estimate up to between 18 to 40,000 people that have died because of that. But you get a little cantaloupe, or you talk about some raw milk, and people get a little tummy ache, and they close down. They bring in guns to close down raw milk, but once again, what's to 18 to 40,000 people dying of an industry that makes billions of dollars, the nuclear power industry. Government agency reports don't match radioactive fallout danger reality. Government agencies aren't doing their jobs. That's right, because one year they're working for the government, and the next year they're working for the industry. So this is what's called a revolving door. Happens in the drug industry. One year they're working for the drug industry, and the next year they're working, and they're the head of the FDA, so-called protecting the people. No, what they're doing is protecting their job and their buddies who are making lots of money off of crap. That doesn't work, and as we'll talk about. So it's interesting. Here's an interesting quote. Fukushima is equal to 168 Hiroshimas. Now, people who don't have any history back there, back in World War II, we dropped 2 bombs, atomic bombs, and caused all kinds of havoc and radiation and all like that. This incident here is 168 of them, so kind of do the math and you can kind of figure out that's not what's going on here. Another kind of an important part is that, when the radioactivity kind of floats around and gets into your body, it's a lot more dangerous than when it's just floating out, and that's where some of the studies show in terms of atmospheric type of radiation versus once it gets in the body. And it has to just do with proximity. the closer it is to your cells, of course, the more dangerous it is. And so they use these kind of deceptive, just like drug industry does, and we'll maybe talk about it. I came across some interesting studies on statin drugs, a $130 billion industry that's pretty worthless. And they just, in fact, I forgot my notes, but we'll talk about it next time. Now their concern is that statin drugs actually increase, diabetes and brain death. So that's good for something that doesn't work, costs lots of money. Let's see. Well, just early on, now this was published in March 18th, 2011. This was about a week after the actual concern with the Fukushima nuclear power plants, is radiation from Fukushima plant detected in Sacramento. So very, very shortly, and as John was mentioning before, it takes about a year to get through the whole world, but very shortly after that, because just how the world works, that exposure here. And what have you heard since that time? Nothing. And what have people done? Nothing. And so people just get cancer and just die needlessly and costing trillions of dollars because people didn't take any action out like that. Here's in 2005, a blue panel, a blue ribbon panel of the National Academy of Sciences. These aren't alternative people. These aren't, people down at your health food store or at the Ace Hardware store. These are the top scientists in physics. And what do they say? They concluded there is no risk-free dose of radiation. Now, that was 2005. That's repeated for probably over the last 40 years. There's a famous MD, PhD, Dr. Epstein, who was an authority on radiation and health, and that's what he stated back in the 60s and 70s, is that no radiation. So whether or not you get it from a nuclear power plant or you go see your drug doctor and get a lot of CT scans, which are special type of imaging, we know that causes up to almost 25,000 extra deaths a year cancer for excess radiation there. These are all preventable cancers. He says that at the University of New Mexico radiologist Dr. Fred Mettler. So we all know that this causes, but once again we want to pretend that it doesn't exist, and if we just turn the channel on the TV station or go to a football game, that's all going to go away because now we're all happy. It's like the last days of the Roman Empire, when the Romans went to go see the gladiators, kill each other and animals. That was all kind of fun. It didn't deal with the decay of their society. Little comment there. The other big problem is that these particular type of nuclear power plants are not just uranium. They actually have plutonium. And in this article here, is this MOX plutonium fuel used in Fukushima unit number 3 is how many more times more toxic than uranium? 5 times? 10 times? 2 million times more dangerous. So that's why this is so, once again, so scary about what's going to happen in the next 10, 20, 30 years.